If one day you feel that reality is about to tear open from within, it will not be just a hunch. It will be the call for a quantum leap. Not a physical leap, but an expansion so profound that your old way of existing will no longer be able to sustain you. It is a point of no return, where subtle forces begin to reorganize your life as if a hidden code were rewriting the plot. Some signs appear before this point. Perceptions that seem to come from a place you have never accessed before, synchronicities so precise they defy any calculation, and a strange feeling that something, invisible but insistent, is pushing you toward a broader version of yourself. It is not a coincidence, it is physics and consciousness working side by side, preparing the ground for you to cross a threshold that is impossible to undo. Today you will realize that these signs are not mere symptoms of change. They are triggers for a radical realignment, forces that test your resilience and open gateways to realities that coexist with yours, but that until now have been out of reach. If you stay with me until the end of this video, you will not only recognize whether you are on the edge of a quantum leap, you will have clarity on how to respond to this call without fear and with precision, becoming a co-author of the reality that is about to emerge. It is at this point that the body begins to become a radar, not only for what happens around you, but for frequencies that escape ordinary perception. High pressure in the air, a sudden change in the intensity of colors, a shiver with no apparent cause, all of this begins to carry the weight of a message. In the process of a quantum leap, the logical mind tries to fit these experiences into familiar explanations but fails. And this failure is not a mistake. It is the sign that the internal map is being redrawn. Neuroscience explains that the brain operates through predictable patterns, supported by neural networks reinforced over the years. But when a massive shift in perception is about to occur, this system begins to present glitches, moments of sudden insight, lapses in the linear notion of time, sensations of déjà vu for something still happening. It is as if your field of perception begins to pick up data from a parallel dimension, anticipating the new reality before it manifests tangibly. In the field of quantum physics, these changes are interpreted as collapses of the wave function that are not limited to the immediate present. The observer, by changing their frequency of perception, influences not only what they see, but the very spectrum of possibilities available. This subtle adjustment creates what some call inflection points, events or encounters that cannot be attributed solely to chance. It is in this territory that the quantum leap begins to take shape, first as a sensation, then as an inevitable event. On the spiritual plane, the process is compared to an energetic reconfiguration. It is as if old vibrational structures were unraveling so that new patterns could be established. This transition is not always comfortable. Relationships may become incompatible, habits may lose their meaning, and even the physical body may react with fatigue or euphoria for no apparent reason. It is not punishment or a test, but a deep realignment, forcing every part of your being to adjust to the new frequency. Throughout this movement, small pattern breaks begin to occur almost imperceptibly. A path you always chose suddenly feels strange. A song you never noticed plays at the exact moment you are thinking about an important decision. A sentence from a stranger answers a question you did not dare to ask aloud. These details, which many ignore, become compasses for those about to cross a point of no return. The most intriguing part is that this initial phase of the quantum leap does not depend on conscious effort to begin. It settles in like a kind of gravitational field, pulling your attention toward elements that were once irrelevant. It is a constant invitation, sometimes subtle, sometimes unsettling, to look beyond what you used to call real. And each time you accept this invitation, even for just a few seconds, the old structure loses a little more strength. Some describe this experience as walking through a hallway where doors open and close on their own. You do not know exactly where each one leads, but you feel that certain choices align with something greater, a design that will only be understood after the leap is taken. At this point, intuition ceases to be a timid voice and begins to act as a driving force, reorienting routes and decisions with a precision that logic could never achieve. The challenge lies in dealing with the anxiety that arises in this process. The unknown, as fascinating as it is, also carries the potential to paralyze. but it is precisely this tension between fear and attraction to the new that generates the energy needed for the leap to happen. Physics describes this as the buildup of potential energy before a sudden displacement. In human experience, it is the sensation of being on the verge of breaking away from everything you have known, even without concrete proof that the change will be safe. And that is where perception changes irreversibly. With each small sign recognized, with each synchronicity noticed, your consciousness begins to expand to accommodate a new version of reality. This expansion is not a single act, but a self-reinforcing process. The more you perceive, the more the new reality solidifies, until nothing remains of the old structure capable of holding you back. At this point, the quantum leap ceases to be a possibility and becomes an event in preparation. No matter how much you try to slow it down, the flow has already been activated, and the old version of yourself is dissolving to make way for something that cannot yet be described, but is already inevitable. With the field already activated, something subtle begins to happen. The concept of time loses consistency. Days may feel condensed into hours, while some minutes drag on as if they contain an eternity. This distortion is not a mere illusion, but a reflection that your internal point of reference is changing. The quantum leap does not occur within the common timeline. It redraws the very structure upon which that line rests. Quantum physics suggests that past, present, and future coexist like overlapping layers. What differentiates one reality from another is the state of observation you sustain. When this state begins to oscillate, it is as if different timelines start competing for your attention. Small flashes of memories that do not belong to your history, premonitions that come true, or the feeling that you already knew the answer before even formulating the question. All these are symptoms of multiple potentials being accessed. The body responds to these changes with subtle adjustments, almost invisible to those not paying attention. The heartbeat may accelerate in the face of a seemingly trivial choice, breathing changes cadence in certain environments, and even body temperature may fluctuate without any relation to the weather. These physiological signals are not random. They act as markers that something greater is aligning in the background. It is as if the nervous system were the bridge between what has not yet manifested and what is already beginning to take form. On the emotional plane, the transition can provoke intense contrast. Moments of deep euphoria alternate with periods of dense introspection. This does not mean instability in the pathological sense, but rather constant recalibration to sustain the field that is forming. Each emotional peak and valley functions like internal tides preparing the ground for the anchoring of a new frequency. It is common at this stage for a sudden disconnection from old interests to arise. What once seemed vital loses relevance, while themes, people, and places previously unknown begin to awaken an inexplicable interest. This exchange of references is not mere whim. It reflects the replacement of old anchor points with new vectors of energy. The quantum leap requires both internal and external space, and for that, certain connections must dissolve so others can be established. Spirituality describes this point as the beginning of a vibrational detachment. It is not about abandoning physical reality, but about no longer operating exclusively within the parameters that once defined your existence. It is as if you were learning to sustain two realities simultaneously, the one still visible before your eyes, and the one pulsing as a concrete possibility within your inner field. This hybrid state is unstable and demands attention not to get lost in the excess of stimuli. At the same time, synchronicities gain density and precision. An apparently casual encounter with someone on the street proves decisive weeks later. A stray phrase in an informal conversation becomes the trigger for a transformative decision. These occurrences cease to seem like coincidence and begin to be perceived as part of an intelligent dialogue between you and the fabric of reality. It is at this point that consciousness begins to take on the role of co-author, realizing that your attention is the currency with which you negotiate the next frame of your existence. This is also the moment when resisting the process becomes increasingly difficult. The old identity begins to dissolve, not by external imposition, but because it no longer contains the energy necessary to sustain the new configuration. Like software that cannot run on obsolete hardware, old patterns of thought and behavior simply stop working. The discomfort this causes can be intense, but it carries within it the proof that something much greater is about to emerge. What is at stake at this stage is not just a life change, but a change in the perception of reality. The quantum leap reorganizes the way you interpret every detail, from small daily interactions to the great events that shape your destiny. And once this kind of perception expands, there is no way to return to the old way of seeing the world. This irreversibility is what makes the process so radical. It is not about gradual improvement, but about accessing a range of reality that once seemed impossible, and that now begins to present itself as the only possible logic for your existence. And although you are still standing in the same physical place, the entire surrounding scenario already begins to respond as if it were speaking to a new version of you. At this point, the feeling of living two layers of reality intensifies. It is as if every decision were evaluated not only by what it produces in the immediate moment, but by the effect it will have on something still invisible, yet palpable in potential. This is one of the most fascinating paradoxes of the quantum leap. The future begins to influence the present, guiding actions and choices based on an alignment that will only make sense later. Quantum science describes this phenomenon as retrocausality, the possibility of future events influencing the now. Although controversial in the academic field, in the realm of subjective experience, it manifests in a crystalline way. You feel that certain doors need to be opened, even without knowing what lies behind them. It is a movement that defies linear logic, but follows an unshakable internal coherence. This coherence is sustained by something deeper than rational thought. It comes from an integration between what the mind perceives and what the energetic field records. Physics may explain part of this in terms of wave resonance and interference, but in practice, it is the feeling that the external world responds to your internal state more and more directly. The more you align with this state, the more the signs multiply, creating an almost inevitable flow. At this stage, detachment becomes not only necessary but natural. Certain plans that once seemed non-negotiable begin to dissolve, not out of giving up, but from recognizing that they no longer correspond to the path unfolding before you. The quantum leap requires space for the new, and the new can only find its place where the old has ceased to occupy. It is a process that may bring melancholy, but also carries deep relief, like letting go of a weight that no longer made sense to carry. Sensory perceptions also change. Sounds once ignored now have texture. Colors seem to carry temperatures, and the simple act of walking down the street can bring a sense of displacement in space-time. It is not that the world has suddenly changed, but rather that your way of decoding it has broadened. It is like exchanging limited lenses for others capable of capturing previously invisible spectrums. This expansion also affects how you relate to other people. Casual conversations begin to reveal hidden layers, and superficial interactions may become unbearable, not out of arrogance, but due to a lack of vibrational compatibility. On the other hand, encounters with people who share this new frequency are marked by instant recognition, as if they were pieces of a puzzle that had always been incomplete. Here arises an important internal shift, realizing that the quantum leap is not a solitary act, but a dance with the very web of consciousness that connects everything. Particle physics shows that entangled systems remain interconnected regardless of distance. On the human plane, this means that your internal changes affect and are affected by others going through the same process, even if you have never met physically. This awareness of interconnection brings a sense of responsibility. It is no longer just about what I want to create for my life, but what my transformation is feeding into the whole. This level of perception transforms every gesture, every word, and even every thought into active elements in building the collective field. And it is at this point that the journey stops being about what I will gain from this and becomes about what I am becoming. This shift in focus is perhaps the greatest sign that the point of no return has been reached. There is no longer the possibility of going back to the old way of existing without feeling that something essential has been lost. If you are feeling this vibration in your body right now, recognizing fragments of your own experience in what I have described, then you are probably already on the edge of your own leap. And here is the invitation. Share in the comments a short phrase that represents what you are feeling at this moment. It could be something like, "I am ready for the leap," or any expression that conveys your current frequency. And if this conversation resonated with you, like this video, not only to support the work, but to signal to the field that you are consciously choosing to enter this new phase. The moment following this perception of irreversibility brings a kind of heightened clarity. It is as if the landscape of your life were revealed under a different light, highlighting connections that were previously hidden. Past decisions, significant encounters, and even painful events begin to fit together like pieces of a larger design, and this new vision dissolves part of the anxiety about what lies ahead. The quantum leap is no longer just a concept, it becomes a living experience, pulsing in every detail. At this stage, the rational mind, once uncomfortable with gaps in understanding, begins to yield. It realizes that it is no longer the sole authority on what is real. The sensory field, intuition, and even seemingly random impressions gain weight in decision-making. It is not about abandoning logical thought, but about integrating it into a broader perception, capable of capturing subtle nuances and responding to them instantly. In physics, there is the concept of quantum coherence, a state in which distant particles act as if they were part of the same system, maintaining an invisible order. On the plane of consciousness, this state manifests as an internal harmony that influences the entire surrounding environment. You become a point of stability amid chaos, and this affects not only your own experiences, but also those of anyone who comes into contact with you. From this point on, the flow of synchronicities intensifies in an almost unsettling way. Unlikely paths open up, resources arrive from unexpected sources, and encounters align with a precision that borders on the impossible. The old notion of effort begins to transform. It is no longer about forcing reality to mold itself to your plans, but about positioning yourself so that it reorganizes itself around you. This shift in relationship with reality also changes the way you perceive what you once called obstacles. Situations that could be interpreted as blockages are now seen as strategic redirections. Instead of fighting against them, you begin to read the movement and find entry points through non-linear paths. This ability is central to sustaining the quantum leap, for it does not occur in a straight line, but in successive jumps that require instant adaptation. Energetically, this phase is marked by an expansion of the personal magnetic field. It is as if your body were emitting a stronger signal, attracting what is in resonance and repelling what is not. This explains why, during this period, some connections end abruptly while others seem to intensify as if they had always existed. It is not merely a matter of conscious choice, it is the natural dynamic of compatible frequencies meeting. This new internal configuration inevitably sparks reactions in the environment. People close to you may sense the change and respond in different ways. Some draw nearer, seeking to understand and perhaps join this movement. Others distance themselves, unsettled by the transformation. Both reactions are natural, for the quantum leap affects not only those who live it, but also the network of relationships in which that person is embedded. A curious effect of this stage is the feeling that life is gaining its own rhythm, independent of your attempt to control it. Instead of feeling dragged along, you realize you are being guided with precision toward experiences that accelerate your process. It is like navigating a current that, far from being a threat, reveals itself as the fastest and safest path to the next point of expansion. On the internal level, the sense of purpose becomes refined. The pursuit is no longer for external validation or specific results, but for integrity with the state of consciousness you wish to sustain. You understand that the leap is not just an event, but the ongoing maintenance of this new frequency, and that each choice can either consolidate or dissipate it. The most transformative realization is that it is not about arriving somewhere. The quantum leap is, in essence, the ability to live in continuous harmony with a reality in flux, recognizing that each moment contains the potential for a new version of yourself. And in this recognition, the urgency to control the outcome dissolves, making space for a trust that is not blind, but grounded in the repeated experience that the field responds. With the new rhythm established, perception begins to expand into something even broader. The awareness that reality is not a fixed scenario, but a dynamic field in constant adjustment. In the context of the quantum leap, this means understanding that each choice, each focus of attention, is like a silent command that reorganizes what is around you. This understanding does not come as theory, but as direct experience, repeated to the point of becoming undeniable. This stage brings such an intense sense of co-authorship that the separation between what I create and what happens to me begins to lose meaning. Modern physics suggests that the observer influences the experiment. But here, in everyday life, this translates into realizing that the very act of being conscious alters the course of events. The simple fact of sustaining a different vision already changes the set of possibilities available to you. With this, the signs from the field become clearer. Words spoken by strangers, patterns in the news, subtle movements in nature. Everything begins to be perceived as a response or confirmation. It is as if the fabric of reality were constantly sending messages, and now you had learned the language to interpret them. This communication does not happen through linear logic, but through a kind of simultaneous tuning between what you feel and what the world manifests. On the internal level, this constant dialogue requires refined presence. It is necessary to cultivate a state of attention that is not tense, but alert, receptive, yet not passive. At this point, the practice of sustaining the new frequency ceases to be effort and becomes almost a reflex. You begin to realize that maintaining this tuning is less about doing and more about allowing the flow to continue without unnecessary interruptions. The transition also reveals something powerful, the ability to instantly reframe events that would previously have been classified as negative. A setback is no longer seen as an obstacle, but understood as strategic reorganization. A delay may prove essential for an important meeting to happen. A cancellation may open space for an opportunity that did not exist before. This flexibility in interpreting events is essential to sustain the energy of the leap. Another phenomenon that intensifies at this stage is the sensation of recognition in new places and situations. Upon entering an unfamiliar space, you may feel as if you already know it deeply. This familiarity is a sign that your consciousness is accessing information from parallel realities or alternative timelines, something quantum theory suggests as a possibility through states of superposition. This expanded access also awakens a kind of future memory, the perception that certain scenarios are already partially formed, awaiting only the right moment to manifest. It is not guesswork, but the reading of patterns that are already energetically configured. This ability does not guarantee that everything will happen exactly as seen, but it offers guidance that reduces friction along the way. With this clarity, choices begin to be made based on internal coherence, and not just external logic. Often this means making decisions that seem risky to an outside observer, but that carry a sense of inevitability for you. This alignment between decision and frequency creates a cascading effect, accelerating the process and consolidating the new reality with greater stability. The central point of this stage is understanding that the quantum leap is not just about changing place or life condition, but about sustaining an expanded identity capable of interacting with multiple levels of reality. It is a posture that requires courage and discipline, but also brings unprecedented freedom, the freedom of not being tied to a single script. This phase prepares the field for the conclusion of the leap, when the new configuration not only stabilizes, but begins to generate perceptible impacts on the collective. It is the moment when your transformation ceases to be only personal and begins to consciously influence systems, environments, and people around you. And upon perceiving this influence, you understand that the true leap does not end with you, but continues reverberating like waves expanding in all directions. The field no longer reacts as before. It responds immediately, as if the new configuration were integrated into the very fabric of reality. At this point, the quantum leap ceases to be a transition and becomes your natural state. What once seemed like effort is now flow. What seemed like uncertainty is now silent precision. The old identity dissolves like a dream from which you have awakened, but whose outlines can still be remembered without weight. Life begins to present itself as a continuous sequence of fine adjustments in which each gesture carries creative power. You realize that the leap was not an isolated event, but the beginning of a permanent relationship with a malleable, living reality that responds to your deepest alignment. And deep down you understand that there is no return, not because the doors have been closed, but because the new vision no longer fits into the old frame. This awareness brings serenity. There is no longer the urgency to prove anything, only the clarity to sustain what you have become. And perhaps this is the greatest gift of the whole process, discovering that the leap is not about escaping something, but about becoming the very space where all possible versions can exist. If you have made it this far, write in the comments, "The leap is now," so that I know you have followed until the end. And if this content resonated with you, and you want to receive more messages like this, subscribe to the channel. There is still much to be revealed.